Chapter 1: The Girl in the Willow Cottage. Long ago, nestled at the edge of an ancient forest where the trees whispered secrets older than time, there was a village called Eldoria. It was a place of simple joys and forgotten magic, where farmers tilled the soil with humming songs, and elders spoke in low tones of wonders that once were. No one truly believed in enchantments anymore, except the old storyteller who lingered by the fire on festival nights. And perhaps the girl in the willow cottage. Elara was her name, a girl with hair the color of twilight and eyes like dew on wildflowers. She lived with her grandmother in a moss-draped cottage that leaned kindly beneath the arms of a great weeping willow. Though she was no princess, she was beloved by all for her gentle heart, her gift for tending the sick, and the way flowers bloomed brighter after she passed by. Her grandmother, Marin, had once been the village healer and keeper of old tales. Now, frail with age, she spent her days by the hearth, spinning yarns of lost kingdoms, brave knights, and the prince who vanished into the forest 100 years ago, seeking a love strong enough to break a cruel enchantress's curse. "Stories to keep the children quiet," Elara would say with a fond smile. "No one truly disappears for 100 years." But Marin only chuckled softly. "Some truths wear the mask of fairy tales, child." Elara didn't argue. She loved her grandmother's stories, even if she didn't believe them. They made the long winter nights feel warmer. Yet, sometimes, when she walked by the forest's edge, she felt something watching, something gentle, something waiting. One morning, as the mists curled low and the dawn painted the grass with silver frost, Elara heard a voice. It was soft, like the wind brushing leaves, but it said her name clearly. Elara. She spun around. No one. "Must have been the breeze," she murmured, shaking her head, but it happened again the next day, and again. The voice always came at dawn and dusk, when the village was still and the forest sighed like a sleeping giant. It never frightened her, only stirred something inside, like an old memory not yet remembered. One twilight, curiosity overcame her. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped past the willow tree into the fringe of the forest. The trees whispered and bent as if guiding her, revealing a trail of wild violets glowing faintly underfoot. The air grew thick with magic, an ancient sort of hush that made even the birds pause. After a time, she came upon a clearing she had never seen before. There, under the golden boughs of an ancient tree, stood a boy. Or a man, rather, but not entirely. He wore simple clothes, gray as ash, and a cloak that shimmered like mist. His face was handsome yet strange, his eyes pale and unreadable. "I thought you'd never come," he said. Elara blinked. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," he replied with a quiet smile. "But I've known your name for a long time." She took a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" He tilted his head. "Call me Ash." "That's not your real name." He looked away. "No, but it's the name I can give you." There was a pause, then laughter broke the tension. They sat beneath the glowing tree and talked, about flowers, stars, silly village happenings, and dreams. Elara didn't notice how dark it grew, or how the forest stood still as if listening. When at last she rose to leave, he said, "Come again tomorrow, if you like." "I might," she said, trying not to smile too much. And she did. Every evening, Elara returned to the clearing and Ash would be waiting. He never stepped beyond the bounds of the glade, never told her more than his name, and never touched her hand, yet something passed between them like wind through leaves, an understanding, a pull. And though she didn't yet believe in curses or fairy tales, Elara began to believe in Ash. What she didn't know was that with each visit, the enchantment around him grew weaker, and the forest, long slumbering, began to wake. Chapter 2: The Prince of the Mist. In the deepest heart of the Eldorian forest, Beyond even the oldest maps and memory, there stood the ruins of a once glorious palace. Now choked with ivy and swallowed by time, it had long been forgotten by the world. But within those crumbling walls lived a memory that refused to die. A prince named Caelan, bound by a sorceress's curse. He had been young when the spell was cast, barely 18, full of courage and dreams. The sorceress, spurned by his father's refusal to marry her, had vowed to erase the royal bloodline from history. With a word, she made Caelan invisible to all but the forest, and cursed the kingdom to forget its heir. Only true love, freely given, may shatter this fate, she had whispered before vanishing into ash. And so Caelan remained, neither dead nor alive, neither man nor ghost. He wandered the mist-veiled paths of the forest, a figure of dreams and silence. The trees grew used to his passing. The deer did not flee from him. The wind carried his voice, though none could hear it. Until Elara. She was different. The first time he saw her, she was kneeling by the brook that marked the edge of his prison, brushing her fingers through the water with a faraway look in her eyes. Something about her shimmered. When he spoke her name, it came from his lips like a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Elara. She didn't hear him then, not at first, but he kept trying. Day by day, he pressed against the edge of his world, whispering her name into the breeze. And one morning, she turned. The moment their eyes met, something inside Caelan cracked. She saw him, not just with her eyes, but with something deeper. His image flickered into her world like the glow of a dying star, and he felt real again. To hide the truth, he called himself Ash, a name made of shadows and cinders, fitting for one who lived half a life. He did not tell her he was a prince. He did not speak of curses or forgotten crowns. He simply listened to her laugh and let the warmth of her presence fill the void that had grown vast inside him. She spoke of her grandmother and willow trees, of planting herbs and singing with birds. He had never known such a life, so simple, so vivid. He had known banquets and court dances, but never joy in picking blackberries or mending a torn apron. Elara's stories were more enchanting than any spell, but the more time he spent with her, the more dangerous it became. The enchantment binding him was unraveling, strand by strand. At night, Caelan could feel it, the forest beginning to pulse with change, the mist thinning, the palace trembling in its sleep. Love was awakening him. But the curse had one cruel twist. If Elara learned who he truly was before she loved him fully, the spell would snap shut forever. He would be lost, not only to her, but to the world. So he kept the truth buried, even when her eyes lingered too long, even when his heart ached to reach out and touch her hand. And yet, Elara asked nothing of him. She did not pry or press or demand explanations. She accepted him as he was, a boy named Ash who walked in the woods and spoke of stars. One evening, as twilight deepened and the fireflies danced like sparks from a dream, Elara turned to him and said, "You always look as if you're waiting." "I am," he said softly. "For what?" He hesitated, then, "For someone to remember me." She smiled, not understanding, but moved, all the same. "I think I will," she said. "Even in dreams, I think I'd find you." That night, Caelan could not sleep. He stood beneath the boughs of the glowing tree and looked toward the distant towers of his ruined palace. For the first time in 100 years, he let hope bloom like a rose inside his chest. But the forest, ever watchful, whispered warnings through the leaves. And far away, a shadow stirred, the echo of the sorceress's curse, awakening with rage. The game had begun. Chapter 3. The Enchanted Encounter. The forest knew secrets. It whispered them through the rustle of leaves, tucked them under mossy stones, carried them on the backs of birds who remembered ancient songs. But some secrets the forest kept hidden even from itself, until Elara stepped into its heart. Each evening she walked the now familiar path past the willow tree and into the woods. It never felt frightening. The birdsong softened when she passed, and fireflies gathered like lanterns to light her way. Her feet always knew where to go, drawn as if by a thread of invisible silk. She met Ash in the same clearing, beneath the golden boughs of that strange, radiant tree. Its leaves shimmered as if spun from sunlight. Its roots hummed with energy, and the air always smelled faintly of roses and rain. There was something unspoken between them now, a quiet ache, a warmth that pulsed just beneath the surface of their words. They never mentioned it aloud, as if doing so would make it too real, or worse, make it disappear. "I brought you something," Elara said one evening, smiling shyly. From the pocket of her cloak, she produced a small, carved charm, shaped like a crescent moon, smooth and pale. Ash's fingers trembled slightly as he took it. "It's beautiful." "It's willow wood," she said, "from the tree outside my home. They say it protects against sorrow." He ran his thumb over its surface. "I have sorrow," he said softly, "but when I'm with you, it's quiet." For a moment, the world around them held its breath. Then Elara laughed, breaking the spell. "You say the strangest things." "I live in a strange place," he replied, glancing at the trees. They talked for hours, sharing silly stories and secret dreams. Elara told him she wanted to see the sea one day. Ash spoke of gardens that bloomed even in winter, and stars so close you could hear them sing. But she noticed he never spoke of his past. Once, she asked, "Where's your home?" His smile faltered. "Far," he said. "Farther than you can walk, hidden from time." "And your family?" He looked away. "Gone." Alara's heart ached for him. "Then you have me," she whispered, surprising even herself. Ash looked at her then, his eyes gleaming with something too deep to name. "I know." The wind rose suddenly, swirling around them with a soft whoosh. The leaves on the golden tree rustled like applause. A strange sensation washed over Elara, a tingle along her spine, a pull in her chest, as if the forest itself had heard her words and etched them into its roots. That night, she dreamed of rose petals falling like rain, and a palace made of glass crumbling into silence. The next day, as she prepared to visit the clearing once more, her grandmother paused at the door. "You've been walking in the woods a lot, haven't you?" Elara hesitated. "Just exploring." Marin's eyes, clouded by age yet still sharp, narrowed slightly. "Be careful. The forest remembers things the village has long forgotten." "I know," Elara said. "But I'm not afraid." Marin reached out and pressed a wrinkled hand to Elara's chest. "That's the problem with hearts. They're braver than brains." Elara kissed her cheek and went anyway. That evening, Ash was waiting. But he seemed different. Restless. The mist around him shimmered more brightly than usual, and his hands were clenched at his sides. "What is it?" Elara asked. "I shouldn't keep coming," he said. Her breath caught. "Why?" "Because the more I see you, the more I become visible, real, and the forest, it stirs. My world begins to unravel." "Then let it unravel," she whispered. "If you're trapped, I want to help." He looked at her then, eyes filled with pain and hope. "You don't understand. If you try to help, and you fail, this forest will take everything. Not just from me. From you." "I'm not afraid," she said, and stepped closer. The mist parted between them. For the first time, Ash reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm, real. He smiled, and it was the saddest smile she'd ever seen. "Then I'll stay." But the forest was listening. And far beyond the golden tree, in a forgotten corner of the ruined palace, a single petal fell from a sleeping rose. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Curse. Storms came rarely to Eldoria, but when they did, they came with stories. The sky rumbled like a dragon in slumber, and the wind howled as though telling secrets no one should hear. That night, the wind carried more than rain. It carried voices. Elara lay awake in her bed, the charm Ash had kept now resting beneath her pillow. She dreamt of a thorn-covered palace, its windows shrouded in mist. A garden lay beyond it, frozen in time. And at the center, a single rose pulsed with light. But the petals were falling. She woke with a cry, heart racing. The storm outside still raged. From her chair beside the fire, Marin stirred. Another dream? Elara nodded, breathless. Marin leaned forward, her voice low and certain. Tell me everything, child. Spare no detail. And so Elara did. She told of Ash, of the glowing tree, of the mist that clung to him, and how he never crossed the forest's boundary. She even shared the dreams, of the rose, of the palace. When she finished, her grandmother said nothing for a long while. Then she stood and reached for the iron box hidden beneath the hearth. From it, she took an old parchment, brittle and yellow, with age. The ink was faded, but legible. Read, Marin said. Elara read aloud. He who is cursed shall remain unseen, forgotten by kin, erased from time. Only when love is freely given, beyond name and title, beyond fear and fate. May the bond be broken. But should truth come too soon, the rose will fall, and the prince shall fade. Elara stared. A prince? Marin nodded. The last royal of Eldoria vanished into the forest a century ago. They say his mother begged the sorceress for mercy, but the spell was sealed. A boy taken by the trees, a palace turned to ruin, and a rose kept alive only by the hope of love. Elara's thoughts reeled. Ash, he's the prince. Marin's expression softened. You already knew, didn't you? In your heart. Tears pricked Elara's eyes. Then why won't he tell me? Because he can't, Marin whispered. If he tells you before your heart is sure, the curse won't break. It will become eternal. Elara felt her breath leave her. She remembered his warning, the fear in his voice, the way the mist had shimmered when he'd said her name. What can I do? You must choose, said Marin. Love him without knowing more. Trust your heart and let it lead you to the truth. Or demand answers and lose him. The storm faded by morning, leaving silver dew on every blade of grass. Elara stood at the forest's edge, her shawl wrapped tightly around her. The trees swayed gently as though sensing her decision. She stepped inside. When she reached the glade, Ash was there. But something had changed. The air was heavy, like breath held too long. You dreamed of the rose, didn't you? He asked quietly. She froze. How do you know? Because I did too. He stepped forward, eyes haunted. It's blooming faster now. The curse knows what's happening. Elara swallowed. Tell me everything, Ash, please. He closed his eyes. If I do, you might lose me forever. But if you don't, she said, we'll both be trapped. His voice trembled. I was a prince, long ago. My name is Caelan of Eldoria. A sorceress cursed me to vanish, until someone could love me not for my name, but for my heart. You are the first to hear my voice, the first to see me. The curse is breaking because of you. Elara stepped back. A wind stirred the glade. Leaves danced around them like warning spirits. And now, she whispered, now it's waking, and if we don't find the rose before the last petal falls, I will vanish, Elara, entirely. The world tilted. Where is it? He pointed north. Beyond the river, beyond the thorns, in the palace that time forgot. Elara met his eyes. Then we'll go. But Caelan shook his head. Only you can go. The forest won't allow me. I'm still bound to this place. Her voice broke. You want me to go alone? He touched her face gently. I don't want to, but I must. Elara nodded, tears in her eyes. Then I'll go. I swear it. As she turned to leave, the mist around him shimmered like moonlight. Behind her, Caelan whispered, Remember me. I always will, she said, stepping into the forest's shadow. And far away, in a palace hidden from time, the rose of Eldoria stirred. Chapter 5. The Mask Falls. Elara journeyed deeper into the forest than she ever had before. The familiar paths gave way to gnarled roots and twisted brambles. Even the trees grew taller here, ancient and watchful, their bark furrowed with faces that seemed to whisper warnings. She dared not heed. She carried only her grandmother's lantern and the crescent moon charm Ash had once held. The mist thickened as she moved north, toward where Caelan had said the palace lay, but the forest did not try to stop her. It opened its arms like an old friend, quiet and expectant. After hours of walking, Elara came to a river choked with vines. No bridge spanned it, and the water ran dark and silent. As she stepped to the bank, the charm around her neck grew warm. Then, slowly, the vines slithered apart, revealing stones beneath, an ancient crossing, just wide enough for her feet. She whispered thanks to the forest and pressed on. By nightfall, she stood before the palace gates. They were massive, twice her height, iron wrought into thorny shapes. The towers beyond had collapsed in places, but parts of the castle still stood, vines crawling up the stone like veins. The air was thick with enchantment. As she pushed the gates open, the wind shifted. A voice, one she had not heard before, echoed faintly through the courtyard. Who dares disturb the sleep of sorrow? Elara stepped forward. I come for the rose. The voice laughed, low, bitter, feminine. Another girl chasing a dream, another fool drawn by love. Elara walked on. She would not be turned away. Inside the palace, the halls were veiled in silence. Paintings hung crookedly on the walls, their faces blurred by age. Suits of armor lined the corridors, but each had a hand outstretched, as if to block or beg. Elara passed them all. The grand staircase groaned beneath her feet as she climbed to the upper chambers. The light of her lantern flickered, revealing faded tapestries and cracked marble. At the top of the stairs, a pair of blackened doors stood closed. She pushed them open. Inside was a ballroom, hollow and still. And standing in its center, no mist, no veil, was Caelan. Only he was no longer Ash. He wore a silver crown, robes of starlight, and his eyes, they were both familiar and unrecognizable. Regal. Sad. Caelan? Elara breathed. He turned to her slowly. You weren't supposed to see me like this. She stepped closer. But I needed to. He gave a bitter smile. Then the mask has fallen. I am no longer the boy you knew. That's not true, she said, stepping forward. You were always him. And this place, it's part of you too. He looked away. I was raised for duty, not love. My father wanted strength. My mother wanted heirs. When I refused the sorceress's hand, she cursed me to be forgotten. By them, by the world. And they let me go. Elara's heart twisted. But I didn't. No, he said, his voice breaking. You saw me. You remembered me. But now that you know the truth, the curse may solidify. The rose is fading. She touched his hand. It was colder than before. Faint around his figure, the mist began to gather again, curling like a shroud. Then we need to find it. Now. Caelan nodded. The rose lies in the East Tower. But to reach it, you must pass the trial of the heart. What kind of trial? You'll face the 3 things the sorceress feared most: courage, sacrifice, and love. She swallowed hard. Will you come with me? I can only go as far as the tower doors, he said. After that, it's you. Elara looked up at him, eyes burning with purpose. Then, stay with me as long as you can. He nodded once. Then they moved through the palace together, through halls lined with statues, up spiral stairs choked with ivy, past doors that opened by themselves. The castle welcomed Elara now. They reached the base of the east tower just as dawn broke. Caelan touched the door. Once you enter, I cannot follow. I understand, she said softly. He pressed something into her palm. It was a single rose petal, red and glowing faintly. You'll need this. It will show you the way. She leaned forward, pressed a kiss to his cheek, and whispered, Wait for me. He nodded, but she saw the pain in his eyes. Then she stepped into the tower, and the door closed behind her. Chapter 6. The Trial of the Heart. Elara stepped into the tower and was swallowed by silence. The door shut behind her with a solemn finality, as if sealing her inside not just a room, but a truth too long denied. At first there was only darkness. Then the petal in her palm began to glow, a gentle crimson light that pulsed like a heartbeat. It illuminated a narrow hallway carved of stone, smooth and cold beneath her feet. She walked forward, her breath steady despite the chill in the air. Soon, she reached a chamber lit by 1,000 floating candles. In its center stood a creature of bone and shadow, eyes burning like embers. The trial of courage, it hissed. You may not pass unless you face your fear. Elara stood tall. What must I do? The room shifted. The shadows formed a scene, her grandmother lying pale and still in their cottage, the fire gone cold. Elara saw herself standing at the doorway, unable to move, frozen by grief. No, she whispered, backing away. That's not real. It could be, the voice replied, if you fail. Her hands trembled, but then she remembered the real Marin, the fire in her eyes, the strength in her stories, that image, that truth. She clutched to her heart. I carry her love with me. I won't fail. The image shattered. The candles flared and vanished. The shadow creature bowed and melted into the ground. Elara continued onward. The second chamber was a garden, lush and wild, filled with scent and song. In its center was a girl, crying beside a twisted tree that bore no fruit. The trial of sacrifice, said a voice on the wind. To pass, you must give what you hold most dear. Elara stepped closer. The girl lifted her face, her own face. I am the part of you that wants to stay, said the mirror Elara, the one who longs for home, for safety, for Marin's stories and warm bread. Give that up, and you may never return. Elara's eyes filled with tears. She thought of the Willow cottage, the smell of thyme, her grandmother's gentle hands. I love my home, she said, but love demands more than comfort. She reached into her cloak and took the crescent moon charm, the last piece of her old life, and hung it on the twisted tree. At once, the tree bloomed. Petals rained down like snow. The mirror Elara vanished with a smile, and the path opened ahead. The final chamber was dim, lit only by the glow of the rose petal in her hand. A figure stood before her. Caelan. Elara, he said gently. Do you know me? She stepped forward. Yes, he took her hand. Do you trust me? I do. His face darkened. Then why do you hesitate? The room flickered. Another Caelan stepped forward, this one crowned, cloaked in power. Do you love the prince or the boy in the woods? Elara faltered. I love them both. The crowned figure said, What if they are not the same? Then I love the heart beneath them, she replied. Whoever he is, Ash or Caelan, he chose kindness even in sorrow. That is the man I love. The crowned figure melted away. The real Caelan smiled, fading slowly into golden mist. Then go, Elara. The rose awaits. She ran now up the final flight of stairs. Her lungs burned, her limbs ached, but she didn't stop. She burst into the chamber at the top of the tower. And there it was, the Rose of Eldoria. It floated in a glass dome atop a marble pedestal, bathed in soft light. But its petals were few. Only 3 remained. One slipped silently to the floor as she approached. "No," she whispered. "I'm here. I'm not too late." She reached out, her hands shaking, and lifted the dome. A blast of warm air hit her, and the rose flared with light. She took the final petal from her palm and laid it against the flower's heart. The moment stretched. Then, light, brilliant, blinding, all-consuming. The rose unfurled anew, fresh and full and glowing red. The curse had broken. From far below, a cry of wind swept through the palace, and every window flared with golden light. Caelan gasped and dropped to his knees outside the tower door, feeling the magic dissolve from his limbs, the cold leave his skin. He was whole again. And Elara, braver than any knight, had saved him. Chapter 7. The Rose Awakens. Golden light poured from the tower windows, spilling like sunlight after a long winter. The forest trembled, not with fear, but with release. The curse was breaking, and Eldoria, long asleep in shadow, was stirring to life. In the east tower, Elara fell to her knees beside the pedestal. Her heart pounded, her breath short. The rose pulsed with warmth beneath her fingertips, no longer fragile but full, its petals thick, blood-red, and alive. The glass dome had vanished. The room around her shimmered and hummed with magic, sweet, ancient, and powerful. But her body was weak. The trials had drained her. Every step had asked a price, and now that it was paid, she felt herself slipping into the haze, between waking and dreaming. "Elara!" His voice. The door burst open. Caelan stood there, no longer cloaked in mist, no longer half-shadow. He was real, whole. The curse had lifted. He rushed to her side and caught her before she collapsed completely. "I'm here," he whispered, cradling her in his arms. "You did it. You saved us both." She looked up at him, tears streaking her dirt-stained face. "You're real." "So are you," he said with a trembling smile. "And I'll never leave your side again." She tried to smile, but her eyelids were growing heavy. "I'm so tired." "You gave too much," Caelan murmured. "You gave your voice to the beast, your tears to the dead tree, your heart to save mine." His hands pressed gently over her fingers. "But now, let me give back." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. The rose glowed brighter, and a soft breeze, warm as midsummer, swept through the chamber. The light poured into her chest like golden fire, and her breath caught sharply as the exhaustion faded from her bones. Her eyes opened wide. "What?" "You brought me back," he said. "Now I bring you home." The light dimmed. The wind stilled. And Elara sat up in his arms, whole once more. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, eyes filled with wonder, faces lit by the last flickers of the rose's magic. Then, Caelan took her hand and stood, helping her to her feet. "Come," he said, "there's something you need to see." Together, they descended the tower. The palace had changed, its cracked walls now smooth and golden, the tapestries bright once more. Laughter echoed from distant halls, the sound of ghostly memories returning to life. They passed through the ballroom, where sun streamed through stained glass, painting the floor in brilliant colors. Musicians' shadows flickered on the walls, though no one played. When they reached the grand gates, Caelan pushed them open, and the kingdom of Eldoria bloomed before them. Where thorns had once reigned, flowers now stretched toward the sun. The river sparkled like silver thread. The skies were clear, and birds wheeled joyfully above the towers. The forest bowed as they passed. Even the air smelled different, like new beginnings. Elara turned in a slow circle, overwhelmed. It's beautiful. It was always meant to be, Caelan said. It only needed someone to believe in it again. They stood together on the palace steps as the sun reached its highest point in the sky. The kingdom, sensing its prince had returned, sang in silence around them. Caelan looked at her then, truly looked. Elara, you didn't just break a curse, you restored a world. She flushed. I only followed my heart. And it led us home. They walked through the gardens, hand in hand. The golden tree from the forest had rooted itself at the heart of the palace grounds, its branches glowing even in daylight. Beneath it, roses had begun to bloom again, dozens of them, in every color. Elara knelt beside the largest bush and touched a single crimson flower. It's the same, Caelan knelt beside her. It always was. She turned to him, the question she'd held in her heart now forming on her lips. What happens now? He took her hand. Now, I live for something more than a crown. I live for you. For us. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. Then I'd like to stay. You were never meant to leave, he replied. This kingdom remembered you before it remembered me. As dusk painted the skies in lilac and gold, the first villagers from Eldoria, drawn by light and legend, emerged from the forest to find the palace reborn. They saw the prince they'd forgotten, and the girl who'd made them remember. Chapter 8. Happily ever after in Eldoria. The sun had just risen on the first full day of Eldoria's return. In the heart of the palace, bells rang softly, a song the land hadn't heard in over 100 years. They echoed across meadows and hilltops, carried on wind and bird song, reaching the ears of villagers who had only heard of the palace in bedtime tales. One by one, they came, not out of duty, but wonder. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, eyes wide as they beheld marble spires reborn and fountains bubbling with crystal-clear water. Old men wept to see gardens in bloom once more, and at the gates stood Caelan, not as a prince cloaked in mystery, but a man radiant with hope. Beside him stood Elara. She wore no crown, no royal gown, just her forest green dress, a braid in her hair, and the crescent charm hanging once more around her neck. Yet everyone knew who she was, the girl who brought the forgotten prince back to life, the heart that healed a kingdom. The people bowed instinctively, but Elara stepped forward and offered her hand. No need for that, she said gently. We are not above you, we are yours, and you are ours. Caelan's voice rang out behind her. This land does not need rulers, it needs keepers, guardians of memory and of hope. The villagers wept, and then they cheered. A festival was declared. By evening, lanterns floated in the sky like drifting stars, and long tables lined the gardens with bread, honey, fruit, and wine. Minstrels played lilting tunes from balconies. Children danced in circles beneath the golden tree, which now glowed warmly through the night. At the heart of it all, Elara and Caelan walked hand in hand, greeting faces old and new. Marin, who had been brought by carriage that morning, sat comfortably beneath the willow tree the forest had returned to the palace grounds in honor of Elara. Her eyes sparkled as she watched her granddaughter laugh, her fingers curled tightly around a cup of herbal tea. You've done more than I ever dreamed, she whispered to herself, and I was a dreamer. As the stars deepened and the last of the dancing slowed, Caelan took Elara's hand and led her to the old garden archway now repaired with roses. I have something to ask, he said. She tilted her head, curious. Yes? He dropped to one knee. But before he could speak, she laughed and dropped beside him. You don't need to kneel, Caelan. We found each other already. He smiled. Then consider this a promise. that from this day forth, every step I take is with you beside me. As prince or farmer or something else entirely, I want to build whatever comes next with you. She leaned forward and kissed his brow. Then let's begin. And so they did. In the months that followed, Eldoria blossomed as if time had merely paused. Villagers moved into the old stone homes near the palace, planting flowers in every courtyard. The palace library reopened, the healing halls were restored, and storytellers from every land came to hear the tale of the rose and the girl who found it. Elara refused the title of queen. Instead, she called herself Keeper of the Garden, and spent her mornings tending herbs, feeding songbirds, and teaching children the language of flowers. Caelan ruled with grace, but not from a throne. He sat beneath trees in the open air, listened to the needs of his people, and walked among them without guard or gold. Their love remained the kingdom's greatest magic. And once each year, when the first rose of spring opened in the golden tree's shadow, Caelan and Elara would return to the clearing where they had first met. The mist would rise, just as it had that night, and the breeze would carry her name. Elara, she would smile, turning to him. I'm still listening. And he would always reply, and I'm still waiting for forever.